Tournament arc, let's go! Hey, how's it going everyone? Entropy here today with another video. As you can see, if you are subscribed and you've been sticking around with the channel, the thumbnail for the previous video has changed. The reason why is because after doing one of these tournaments, the competitive side of Entropy sparked, and I got some support here and there here. Unfortunately, that support came after I lost the last tournament already, but Entropy decided to actually try to do another tournament and see how it goes. And this time it's a qualifying tournament, so it's a tournament arc. We have quite a few games this time around, which is a positive thing. It just it means that I did decently well to play more games this time around. So the less important parts, I believe, are sped up. The very important parts that I will talk about, I feel inclined to talk about, I will, it'll be in normal speed and I'll commentate on it. This video will be really long, even with the speed up. So be sure to watch the entire thing. If you are interested in the fights, just click the little slow down function, the playback speed function on YouTube to 0.25, and probably will help. I mean, it's still going to be sped up. It's sped up 20 times, but it's going to help you at least, keep track of the game. I hope you enjoy. Tournament arc, let's go. So let's start off with game one really quickly right here. Nothing much in the opening. Had to ride Charon, didn't have Javelin, and here unfortunately we have to ride the main. And the main's a rearguard only skill, so you can't even activate it to filter through this hand. And then Javelin, I'm considering discarding the car or the PBO. Given my hand and lack of options onto calling onto the board, I do decide to discard the PBO, sacrificing the cross ride number for the a better positioning during the PBD turn. But nothing much happens, so we speed through it really quickly right here. So here we can see our opponent's really aggressive. If I hit a damage trigger, okay, so I'm 15k, but our opponent's 16k. This is why riding the main hurts so much, so much. But then we hit a heal. Oh, that's good. Finally drawing into some of the pieces that we can have. Some intercepts are always great. Calling out the card, since we have 3 PGs in our hand, doesn't hurt to be more aggressive here. Oh, our opponent hits a trigger, so we do need a trigger in order to hit our opponent's Vanguard with our own. And we do hit the draw. PBD coming back clutch, checking the draw trigger again. Opponent hits a draw trigger. That SP looks sick. That's the end. Cross ride numbers. Okay. So as we can see here, our opponent isn't really calling down much, which could mean that they have quite a lot of cards that are clogged in their hand. Probably grade 1s or specifically PGs. But we'll have to see. Using the blaster, the Phantom Blaster Dragon to clear up the board, get rid of the intercept and apply some crit pressure to start pulling out some PGs. And I do want to keep the full battle because boosting the rearguard is more valuable right now than boosting the Vanguard. We know that our opponent has a PG because they did search it with Chrono, so it's guaranteed to proc a PG, so that we can guarantee our hit with Chris Lancer to flip as well. And push them to 5. Wow, okay. So we're in a pretty good position right now, Yes, we didn't have the 11k number. No, we're not on cross-run numbers, but we do have 2 intercepts, 3 PGs, and still 3 other intercept options here. Our opponent uses kind of mastery for the Overlord, and this is when I'm really thankful that we have the 3 PGs in hand. Overlord does Overlord things, balk, and then the end. Yeah, that's 1 PG. So we know our opponent, at most has 2 PGs in their hand. Lord swings again, PG procs. 10 plus 2 swings, PG procs. Alright. And here, we know our opponent only has 2 PGs at most. And I believe 1 heal trigger left in the deck. So if we do swing twice with rear guards, and then swing once with Vanguard with a crit, we are guaranteed to win. Right? So let's see if Entropy figures that out. It's like, These are lethal? These are lethal? Should I use the main? No? It doesn't matter what I discard here. 2. Probably the main again. Okay. Yeah, I'm like checking, like, oh, 1 heal left, you know, 2 PGs in hand at most. Yeah, just the main. The main, so I get more feel for the PBD cost. Filter through the deck too. Not bad, not bad. PBD here. It doesn't matter what I snipe, but I guess sniping the Overlord. Boom, boom, boom. There we go. So we have 3 columns that can attack the Vanguard, push out PGs. So that's the first PG. In hindsight, I should have called out the PG so that my Vanguard can hit 26 just in case our opponent hits a heal here. But you know, all's well, all's well. And we hit our heal ourselves. Very comfortable position. Doesn't really matter anymore because our opponent only has 1 heal at most, and we win round 1. Sick. So let's begin round 2. Round 2, I am gonna stick with Shadow Paladins. Let's see what our opponent plays this time around. Oh, they're gonna play Spike Brothers. Both decks I'm really familiar with playing with and against, so I'm pretty comfortable here. I'm just gonna mulligan hard for the Javelin, but keep my Karin just in case I don't have a ride target and just get great that I can just lose from that. I don't want to see that. Opponent rides Medical Manager, you know, great first ride target. Soul charges Deadly Emperor, so that's great, you know. The likelihood of our opponent having Deadly Emperor. Here, I'm considering riding Karin or the Javelin. The thing is, right, if I ride the Karin, that means I can guarantee my PBD by discarding the card. If I ride the Javelin, I can get a free Blaster Dark, and then ensure that my PBD will hit numbers if I do draw into a PBD. And here I do choose to just immediately plus with the Javelin, and then call it the Karin so I don't, you know, overdraw. So that's the Treasured Black Panther. Oh, that's the PBD. So that's pretty unfortunate, especially since we do end up drawing into another card. Again, in this matchup, you know, you definitely do want to be hitting your heals. I don't mind discarding the card right here, just to draw into 2 PBs. Calling the Masquerade out. Masquerade, it hits 20, right? 12 plus 8. So that means even if our opponent hits a trigger, then our Masquerade columns can still hit. And if I hit a trigger, then I can put it to the main and hopefully hit 3 times this turn. Unfortunately not. But we can still guarantee 2 damage this turn. Opponent hits another Deadly Emperor, so the likelihood of them having Deadly Emperor is lower. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. Pretty happy. But unfortunately, our opponent actually does have it. So Mecha Trainer into PG, pretty straightforward option. Douglas, Raki. So our opponent's clearly playing more defensively right here, willing to sacrifice their combo pieces for the intercept value. That's 1 PG at the bottom of the deck. But for Spike Brothers, you know, with Raki, Juggernaut, and cards that just shuffle the deck like Jelly Beans, you know, that's not very important. We draw into a PG, so I'm pretty content with that. We have to ride the card, so I'm deciding should I ride the card here. But you know, you just do, right? The 9K can still hit something without investing a booster, and you still get to +1 off it. And that's the PBO. I'd rather ride the PBO, but you know, you can't complain. You can't complain. Considering the main, but there's nothing much to drop, so I do ride the Curse Lancer instead, so I can ensure a flip. And we finally draw into the PBD, so we can fix our right chain. Curse Lancer, considering if I should give them out the break, but I'm pretty okay with it since we just killed a Braki. We're at 2 damage, so we're comfortable with absorbing some damage. Yeah. That's the Juggernaut. It's the Dudley Phantom. Medical Manager. 2 Reckless Expresses. We hit a draw trigger, really great, but we draw into a heal trigger, not very great. So, General Cypher, into the Soul, Dudley Emperor, 2 Black Panthers, pretty safe defensive option, which again shows that our opponent is really lacking in that field, as is the Spec Brothers in general. Okay, we're 29k. We have 4 draw triggers in our damage zone. Really nice, really nice. And then, you know, we gotta ride our boy PBD, right? There's no reason why to stick to Car. Here I'm pulling out the Car, and then, you know, setting up my PBD. I clear up the board. You know, opponents have 4, and I'm like, you know, maybe I can finish this game soon. So we're gonna. Oh! No, we're gonna kill the Reckless Express, then damage deny our opponent at 4 damage with 1 counter blast only. First Lancer here, set up the intercept. So intercept hits intercept, you know, the main hits intercept, and then Vanguard forces out the 1 PG that I know our opponent has. I could have more, but you know, this is a guaranteed play to apply the pressure and disable our opponent's limit break for the next turn. Calls out 2 Douglases, and then gives us the 5th damage, which means that when we hit a heal trigger, it works. When our opponent hits the first heal trigger, it doesn't work. Draw. Oh, there's PBO, you know. Well, our opponent's lacking in options. We're gonna stay on PBD and keep applying the crit pressure. And here, you know, I'm feeling like we can start, you know, continuing the damage denying and just, you know, get rid of the intercepts and then apply crit pressure to face. Opponent can't enable limit break, and they just, you know, have to use the PG. So something that I would have done as a Spec Brothers player would be, you know, play more, you know, aggressively in the early game with grade 3s, or, you know, without the grade 2s, because like with the intercepts, it means that your opponent has to hit it, so they don't have the option to misplay, and then you're gonna lose out the defensive options later into the game, so that's not good. And just be wary of the counterblast usage, right? Like if they didn't use the Mecha Trainer right here, since they did seem to have, you know, PGs in hand other than the one tutored by Mecha Trainer, then I might have not went for the crit pressure play, and they could have used the limit break for the second time. So moving on to the next round, we are going to play against VOC's Zen, and our opponent's going to be playing a Dungaree Vermilion build, Narukami, searching for the grade 2, and luckily we did get the Jelly Beans, which means that we can search for our Dudley Douglas. Yes, that's the right name. Draw 2. We have 3 PGs in hand, so our defensive options are quite varied. We can play more aggressively with our grade 3s on board instead. And here we do have to search for the grade 2 unless I wanted to get grade stuck, which obviously we don't. Considering if I should give damage to my opponent since they will then be able to use Session, but since I have a lot of grade 1 options, especially since we have 3 PGs, it isn't that necessary to keep the Mecha Trainer, as well as incentivizing our opponent to kind of us want to remove our Mecha Trainer means that we have more board space for future plays as well. So here are the famous hit counterblast Saishin on flip for the free retire. Garuda is a pretty good card. So here, since we do have the Dudley Emperor and we do have the PGs, I don't mind going into Limit Break earlier, being at high damage counts. Not only does that mean I will hit, Limit Break earlier, but it also means that I will be able to maximize the utility of my heals, which I do have at 4. Narukami does not have heals that return to the deck, which means that if I can maintain this damage, this heal activation advantage, then I should be good to go in the game. So getting right back to the game, as we see our opponent has Dungri, and unfortunately hits a heal, putting us back to 3-1 damage. So we ride the Dudley Emperor, applying some pressure to our opponent, making them consider, is it worth it to put me to 4, calling out the Douglas, and then calling out the Juggernaut. So some people often say, oh yeah, calling out your Juggernauts or Draki is a bad play. But if you think about it, it's such a threat that it basically acts as a soft taunt, right? You make your opponent consider attacking or not, giving damage to you or not. And the more they have to think, the more misplays they could make. And that's definitely part of my playstyle, giving your opponent, a lose-lose situation and try to play the best I need to play, set up the game, and win from there. So here the damage is back to 3-3. Now I'm at 4 damage. I'm comfortable with Limit Break. Our opponent hits us to 5, which is a good play. Putting us to 5 damage means that they can finish us next turn. But as you can see, they don't kill the Juggernaut. They actually give me the space to play with the by killing the Deadly Douglas. Our Jelly Beans will activate, and if we do hit a heal, it's going to guarantee to proc because we are at 5. Considering playing the Deadly Phantom behind the Vanguard, but that's not very necessary. I'd rather clear up the board and maintain the card advantage. As well as long as I hit a trigger and our opponent doesn't, then I can put them to 5 this turn. We have 3 PGs as well, so I'm not very uncomfortable in terms of defense. And we do hit a heal, the best trigger option at this point of the game. Our opponent does hit a draw trigger, which is fine. We can still hit them to with 22 and put them to 5. We're at 4, they're at 5. We have 2 intercepts and 3 PGs. Our opponent doesn't have any front row on the board, so we're putting them in the tough situation right now. But they can use the Dungri skill to pop a front row. So yes, pop front row. Garuda, another Dungri. Calling out the Dungri highlights the fact that our opponent doesn't have any intercepts left in the hand. Showing a PG is also great for me because I know how to set up my columns. And we do hit a heal trigger, unfortunately. That will stop the 5th attack, the 3rd attack, even though our opponent, won't pass anyways with the PGs. So here I do have to call up the Douglas in order to use Deadly Emperor's skill. And I will still use it because, getting a booster is not bad, and also the Dudley Emperor in hand doesn't have much utility anyways. I don't want to call out the Medical Manager since Soul isn't really a problem right now, but decking out is potentially a problem. We hit a heal, definitely beautiful. Another heal, not very useful, but we do get the extra power, and this last hit should be it for this game. Alright, game 2, let's get it going. We go for the Spike Brothers again, and our opponent goes for the Royal Paladin MLB deck. Definitely a scary matchup since the MLB can damage deny us, pull out our PGs, and then finish off the game really quickly. Not using the Jelly Beans right now because it's not very necessary, and I don't want my first damage check to be a heal trigger. Rather save it for later. So our opponent does hit the draw trigger, definitely helps with the consistency. check a Douglas. Another Douglas. Considering routing the Douglas, so then we will be at a... it's easier for opponents to give us more damage early on. And that is exactly what I will do. Just casual flex with that SP Douglas. Considering using the Mega Trainer here, since we will have to fetch for the PG anyways, but decide not to. Also deciding to save the Jelly Bean for later, when we are at around 3 or 4 damage, so then I can consider using it and not get out of LB range at the moment. So our opponent does hit a PG, which is music to our ears. Let's see what our opponent does ride into. So it does ride the Blaster Blade, which is good, Calls out the Betty BA. Calls out the Blaster Dart. Basically taunting me by the fact that they will have the MLB combo. Honestly, not very necessary to call the Blaster Dart, since they aren't very close to the hand maximum anyways. You know, so we're at 2, our opponent's at 2. You know, I do want to use the Mecha Trainer soon, so then I can have the PG ready in my hand. Considering if I should though, since if I don't have if I don't use my Mecha Trainer to tutor for a PG, our opponent might consider that we don't have it yet. But we do hit the draw trigger, which is good. We do need the offensive options. We do hit. That's an SPMOB right there. Cancel out, searches for that Blaster Blade. Calls out the Betty BA. Calls out the Blaster Blade. So our opponent successfully puts us to 3 and then leads us to a damage deny situation. It's a heal. It's successful, putting our opponent back to 2 damage. Another heal, unfortunately. I mean, fortunately for us, it doesn't heal another damage. But 3 to 2, and our opponent's at 12k base. Definitely not a great situation right now. Calls out the Devil Summoner, hopefully getting something. Yes, we do. We get the lead Phantom. So then our column can actually hit 13. And we're going to battle. This way, we are forcing our opponent to attack to our face twice. Meaning that our opponent will have to choose if they want to attack or not, if they do have 3 cards in the front row. So 3 to 3 again, our heals will activate, and we still have plenty of them. Trumpeter into Blaster Dark. PG procs. So this style of play, especially since we don't have a lot of options in our hand, definitely makes it more efficient for us to catch up. Especially when our opponent's dead set on damage denying us. The draw, we get the Jelly Bean, and we get the Jelly Bean heal, which is amazing. I was kind of disappointed with seeing the first Jelly Bean into my hand, but you know, another PG to our opponent's damage zone. Things are going pretty well. We still have 1 PG in our hand. We can always still search for you know, a Dudley, returning the heal trigger back to the deck. Opponent calls out a Leon. Blaster Blade. Retiring our Panther, which means 3 attacks will go to our face. No, only 2. Again, sticking to the 3 damage damage deny strategy. That's a PG. So our opponent already shown 3 PGs, I believe. Can we finish this soon? Absolutely no reason to rewrite anything at this point. Sometimes you might consider rewriting the Dudley Emperor just to get that 1 extra soul for your multi-attack, but most of the time it's not worth it. Soul charging the Dudley Emperor, unfortunately, putting back the Jelly Beans. Getting the Dudley Phantom, no more Dudley Douglases in our deck. So this is our final turn, especially since we don't have any PGs and intercept options anymore. We do hit the heal, but it doesn't work since we're at 3 and our opponent's at 4. Deadly Phantom plus Deadly Phantom is 12. And then our rearguard column will attack. Does our opponent have a PG? Yes, they do. Yeah. Very unfortunate. So here we take 1 damage trigger. So as long as our opponent doesn't hit the trigger, oh no, our opponent does hit the draw trigger. And we have to rely on a heal on the 6th damage. Nothing and nothing. Unfortunately, that will be game 2. So let's get into game 3 of this round. Bringing back the Shadow Paladin, expecting the opponent to play MLB. And this is a great matchup because you do have the 13k base beating the 12k base, forcing your opponent to play in a booster to invest to attack your Vanguard. And overall, you have retire options and you have value options that outpace your opponent's MLB player. So as long as I play more aggressively and gain value out of this, it will be a good game. Unfortunately, we missed the ride chain here. No Javelin. We do have a Charon. We tapped the Armenian Rod to search for Blaster Dark or a PVD, but we got Charon into Charon. Opponent runs the Mara. And our opponent has the exact same setup except, our doggies in the soul where it belongs. And they hit the heal early game, use it to use again. We don't want them to see that heal in their hand or their deck at the late game. We draw into another PG, definitely great in this matchup. Ditching the Charon. Bad car. Not bad, especially since we don't have a lot of value options right now. Considering attacking or not, since our opponent's desperate with the Leon, our opponent might not have the MOB or the Ganslot, and so I do not attack. So our opponent can't use their doggy to kind of mouse one opponent to solo and check top 5 for the grade 3. Opponent rides the Blaster Blade. Uses the Leon to ditch the Leon. So definitely showing some desperation in this setup. 13k, checking on Blaster Dark. Great, we hit a heal. Amazing. Draw into the PBD. Great. We got the PBD ride. Call it out behind. 15k beats 9k in terms of numbers. Oh, we get the PBO. So here, if we do get a trigger, then all 3 attacks can pass. Do we use the Aryan Rod? We do. Okay, we get the grade 2. So instead of the 3 attacks based on a trigger, we opt for a safer play to get rid of the dead grade 3 in our hand. Get a draw trigger, but draw into Car, which is definitely not a bad choice. And we do hit a Blaster Blade and a PG out of our opponent's hand. Our opponent does have an MLB, which meant that our damage denied did not help. And also the Ganslot, which means our damage denied definitely did not help. I'm calling it the K. Okay. Does our opponent have the Blaster Dark? Yes, they do. They do have the Blaster Dark. And the Blaster Blade. But this kind of formation means that opponent will not have a front row next turn. So very weak defense, but definitely strong on the offensive portion of this. So we're at 3 damage. Unfortunately, opponent doesn't know that we have 2 PGs, so we're definitely safe for at least 2 turns. Definitely this turn we will be good. Checking the PG, so PG is at the bottom of the deck. Definitely vital to know that information. Now checking at stuff like, oh, where did the PGs go? Oh, what did they check? Checking. Okay, calling out the car. Javelin. Are we gonna retire? We are, because we have the crit pressure, right? Get rid of the K here, so our opponent doesn't have a 10k attacker. Call out the 2 intercepts. Oh, only 1. So then that way we put our opponents at 3, attack with Vanguard, and still be able to proc a PG or deal some damage, and still activate our heals if we do. Opponent doesn't have a PG, puts them to 5. Very exciting. We see another PG. Opponent's options are limited. Call out the Blaster Dark. Use the Lien, ditch the MLB, draw. Call the BDVA. So 9 hits 9, 12 hits 10. Draw. But this means that our opponent lets us have 2 counter blasts in order to use our PBD, and that's probably how this game will proceed. We proc our last PG, so this is definitely going to be the last turn I have with initiative. Probably call out the car. Call out the main. Remember that our opponent has shown 2 PGs in the damage zone, 1 in the bottom of the deck with the drive checks. So definitely opponent only has 1 PG at most right now. Can't use them in the main since I only have 2 counter blasts left. I definitely want to use the PBD retire plus crit. Return the DVA plus 10 plus 1 crit, which means that we can have 2 attacks. 1 to the rear guard, 1 to the face to proc the last PG, and then Vanguard hits face to finish the game. Keeping the 12k attacker just in case we need it to swing in our opponent's Vanguard without a booster later on, if we do survive. But hopefully not. We have to end the game now. Attacking with a 22 crit, because our opponent didn't have a PG last turn. Attacking with a 16. Maybe your opponent does have a PG. They don't. Is it going to be heal? It is going to be heal. Very, very unfortunate what is going to go down. This means we do get the inflip, but that's not even important anymore. We do need to hit a trigger to pass. But if it passes, we win. And it does. We hit a lucky last minute draw trigger. A minor misplay on my end. Definitely very exciting match. And that will be the end of it. Alright, let's get into our third match of the day against TFP's Kagero. Kagero also has a YouTube channel, so be sure to check them out if you're interested. And let's see how this game goes. And the mulligan for, the javelin, pretty good. Nothing very special here. Our opponent rides the PG, music to our ears, of course. And then we just ride the javelin. You saw we have 3 PGs right here, very strong in terms of the defensive options. But in this matchup, not necessarily, because OTT does have the Silent Toms. Our opponent does play 3 Silent Toms, as should an optimal build do. And Silent Tom just cracks through those PGs like nothing. So in this case, I cannot, forsaken the defense portion of the game and play, pure aggro just because I have 3 PGs. No, I still have to manage my intercepts more wisely and ensure that I do have space to play the game. I call out the Javelin and the Charon. The 14k column does hit, and I want to accelerate the game so then I can finish them off before they can pull out the Silent Tom out of their ass. So the Fromage comes out, the little Witch Lulu finally comes out, and one of the downsides of the Witch deck, actually, the Witch starter, is that you can only get the 5k base booster on turn 3. All the other clans, usually have utility with their starter at the very beginning. But you can argue that Lulu is a stronger starter with Soul Blast to draw 1, enabling your Zero Soul skills, as well as drawing 1 card, which is always great. So here our opponent plays out down a full front row of grade 3s, signaling aggression. We show our 4th PG here. And we really don't have a lot of options, right? We don't have any intercepts. Still considering I should play out the PBO, so I will put out the full bow with the Charon, and then call it the PBO, which will enable 3 attacks this turn. And we're gonna go face, taking with the Vanguard first because I still do have heal triggers. And this way, if I do hit a heal, I can still activate it. Our opponent hits a draw trigger, that's fine, we hit 1 too. Our opponent hits a heal trigger, and then we attack the 11k. The 10 plus 3 is not very threatening because I am an 11k base Vanguard after all. And then using the Fromage skill to draw and draw again. So this is the winning image of the deck. You draw into your pieces, your PGs, your Silent Tom, stall out to the 5th damage, and then seal the game with Silent Tom. We see a Silent Tom there. Checking the main. Check a draw trigger. Oh, that's a PBO, so we can have more options now with our offense. See the PBD. We ride the PBO for the 13k base. Considering if I should use the PBO this turn. I'm trying to check if our opponent has hidden any PGs yet. No. Okay, gonna use the PBO to get rid of an intercepts. So this way we can go full aggro on this turn. Hit the heal trigger. This is gonna be big. Second. And this way we can proc 2 PGs if our opponent doesn't hit the trigger, which is good. That's 2. See the Silent Tom, and I had some cold sweat right here. If our opponent hits a trigger and we don't, then the Silent Tom kills. But thankfully they don't, and we do. And I'm just counting the PGs, you know. Well, the current hits the 8k. We call it PBO. If I PBO retire the 9k, the opponent loses the 15k base. And I'll hit the 8k. My 14 will proc a PG. If not, if our opponent hits a heal, then my PBO will still get 2 crit and win the game. And that is the end of this game. Alright, here we go to the next match. Let's see what our opponent's playing. This time around, I swapped to Spike Brothers since I believe it gives me a better matchup against the OTT. And our opponent does play the OTT. Here we mulligan, you know, just for the grade 1, grade 2, and then hopefully get the Dudley Emperor. However, we did get the General Cypher, which is still not a horrible option, but you know, not optimal. Riding the Dudley Phantom instead of the Reckless Express since I don't seem to have many offensive pieces necessary in hand, and the Reckless Express is still a decent 7k booster that I can play later on. So we draw into another Dudley Phantom, play the Dudley Douglas, play more aggressively this time so then I can maintain my maintain a low damage count, so then I can maximize the utility of General Cypher's aggressiveness. And calling the grade 3s won't hurt as much when you're at a low damage count compared to when you're at a higher damage count when you're putting more risk into your game. So our opponent plays out grade 2s, you know, to a relatively safe play, saving their pieces for the next turn, drive checking a Silent Tom. Just checking what they drove check. Yes, that's a Silent Tom. We draw into PG. So here I'm considering not playing anything and hoping for a trigger, and that way I can get my second attack in. But well, here we do hit a trigger. We didn't really see a lot of grade 3s this game, so it's definitely pretty likely. And we hit a second one, Juggernaut, definitely good. Putting it behind the intercept means that your opponent has to hit the intercept, and the Juggernaut can go into the front row and attack the next turn. And this way, with the Mecha Trainer still on the board, it enables me to attack 3 times. So here our damage lead is pretty high. Again, 1 to 4 damage. Our opponent calls out a grade 3 and grade 2 into the front row. So going into the battle phase, this could probably mean that our opponent doesn't have a lot of defensive options, but our opponent does hit a heal, putting them back to 3. We hit a heal, but that is irrelevant. Our opponent does hit us to 3 damage, and the game is back tied. That's what. Oh, we have the Deadly Emperor. Considering riding it, yes, we will. Since our board space is quite clogged, there isn't much utility for Cyphered anymore. And by riding this, the Deadly Emperor, we're pressuring our opponent to make a misplay in considering whether or not they should damage deny us. Here, considering calling out the Bracky for the intercept and calling out a booster, so then our Jelly Beans can actually attack. Calling out the Reckless Express behind the Vanguard was actually a misplay, like it wasn't necessary. But it means that our Vanguard column is guaranteed to hit, which it does. I mean, even without the trigger, it will. It's 21. You know, if our opponent does hit a trigger, they'd be at 21. But not attacking with the Vanguard first means that if I hit a heal, it wouldn't go off. So, you know, it's a trade-off, guaranteeing the damage or potentially hitting the heat. Your opponent pulls out the PG just to use the Fromage skill twice, drawing into more of their pieces. Battle Sister Coco again helps you set up the deck, checking if they put it to the top of the bottom, and they did put it to the bottom, which means that, you know, that card wasn't really necessary. Still kept the grade 3 in the front row, which means that they did lack grade 2 options. We did hit the defensive, but our opponent did build a 21k column. Similar to us, that means they're guaranteed to attack, to land their attack here. We're at 5, they're at 5, but the difference is that Spike Brothers has the multi-attack. So we pull out the Juggernaut, we retire the Jelly Beans, you know, it's not very necessary here. Pull out the Juggernaut, pull out the booster, so then our 2 columns can still hit. 5 attacks, wombo combo here. Pretty straightforward. You know, yes, our opponent does have the 15k, but our Juggernauts can get over the power number. And then here, we can still go over it. So I'm considering like, oh, what happens if our opponent does hit a heal? Well, they'd be at 25, but if I hit the Rearguard Battle Sister, they'd go back to 21. Which means the Douglas does have its utility. But I choose the Juggernaut Maximum instead. Going to seal the game. 17. And then this would hit 17. And that is game. Alright, we're done with that. And this is our 5th match of the day. At this point, I'm getting kind of tired, but the show must go on. Against AKumaSanDesu. Akuma, I've been talking to him. He's a pretty good, cool guy. He has a YouTube channel as well. So if you're interested in, you know, guitar covers, do check him out. Akuma is pun. Akuma is in the devil in Japanese, as well as Akuma. Kuma meaning bear in Japanese as well. Pretty funny guy. Interesting. Opponent does play crits in their Vermilion Narukami deck. Something to be aware of. We have a lot of grade 3 options here. You have the Cyphered, have the Dudley Emperor. Here, since our opponent is playing the crits, I am considering not attacking into our opponent here, just so we can get the extra crit as a safety net. So yeah, we don't hit into the Seishin and don't enable it. Dragonic Death Scythe, another threatening card. Not attacking into us, so we can't use the Mecha Trainer. Here we have 2 grade 2 options. Again, do I damage deny? At this point, I don't think it's that necessary to damage deny. You know, playing aggressively with the 2 grade 2s, and then we have the Cyphered if we want to play aggressively and our opponent doesn't give us damage. And here we both trade heal triggers, but both of them don't activate, which is alright. So with 2 intercepts, it means that our opponent must play. Oh, and our opponent's Dungaree finds 2 PGs. Very unfortunate for our opponent. Plays the Indra, one of Indra. That doesn't really make any sense to me, but definitely for style. Seishin for Mecha Trainer, which is pretty obvious. So here we lose our 1 copy of Double Summoner. Here I'm considering, oh, should I ride General Cyphered or Doubly Emperor, right? Which one would you ride? Here's the question. And let's see what I do decide to do. I do? Do I? What did I do? Come on. Come on. Ride it. Alright, we ride the General Siegfried. Why is that? Well, the reason why is because we don't have a lot of cards that promote card advantage in this match. Calling out the 6k here to hit our opponent's 11k Vanguard. We don't get a grade 3, so we don't get to generate an extra unit, unfortunately. But we do put our opponent to 3 damage. Still ahead in this damage lead. With this formation, if our opponent is greedy and attacks with 3 units this turn, then we will be put to 4 damage, at least. And in this case, our opponent could put us to 5. We do hit a draw trigger though, which means our Vanguard's at 20, and our opponent's Vanguard might not be able to hit unless they hit a crit, and they don't. And then the 21k column does hit us, putting us to 4, but definitely not a poor position to be in, especially since now we can rewrite it to Dudley Emperor and proc our Limit Break to start generating more card advantage. Considering playing the Medical Manager here, so we can have more soul as well as the 21k Vanguard number. So we do. So we're charging the Dudley Douglas. I'll probably call out the Juggernaut here. And then so we can attack 4 times this turn, building the left column properly. 15 hits Vanguard. Put us in a heal, but since we're at 4, they're at 3, it doesn't proc. We hit 21. Putting the dead grade 3 into our soul. Calling out the Panther, Reckless Express combo. So this way we have the 10k offense and defense of the Panther, as well as an extra multi-attack option with Reckless Express next turn. That I am lacking right now in my hand, especially since I'm lacking right now in my hand. So as you recall, our opponent did bind 2 PGs. Definitely not a great situation to be in, especially since I still do have another Limit Break that I can activate next turn. Having 1 Reckless Express means that I will have at least 4 attacks. Our opponent goes to Vermilion, wiping out my front row with Vermilion Thunderbolt. Pushing out the 7k, pulling out the PG, which is a misplay, honestly a misplay. Opponent hits the heal, the crit, which means that our PG will proc. Unfortunately, since our opponent hits the crit, we do lose this game. Oh no, but we hit the heal. The tables have turned. Our opponent ran out of PGs in their hand, ran out of hand in general. Reckless Express, Dudley, the Juggernaut Maximum. Juggernaut Maximum with the boost hits 22, with the Phantom skill hits 26. So we will get 16 hit, and then even if their opponent hits the heal, we will hit them to 21. So following our win in the first game, we go into our second game. This time we're going to play Shadow Paladin. Definitely a more stable deck, less prone to being damage denied and shut down. Here we do mulligan away the car and then the main, but we do keep the grade 1 PG. Considering, okay, keeping the main, kept the grade 1 PG since we do have the Blaster Dark and the PBD, so we can finish the branching off there. And since we're going second, we do get the 2 draws. Speeding through this game, since it really isn't that entertaining. They didn't really get any pieces, you know, just sitting on grade 1s and grade 3s, no intercepts at all. One procs, hits crits, and then, you know, that's basically this game. I didn't have a lot of options to play with, and was just a sitting duck with 2 PGs in hand, got nothing much to do. Really can't, you know, even finish off the game at all, but, you know, that's the end of the game. Alright, let's go to game 3. Unfortunately, the second game didn't really go well at all for me. This time around, I'm going to play MLB, bringing up the spice. If you have seen my MLB guides, you will know that I have quite a bit of experience with this deck. And if you haven't seen it before, go check out my MLB Advanced Guide, my MLB Post-Nerf deck profile. Definitely could help if you're interested in playing MLB in the current meta, and they're definitely not that bad. Definitely underrated, definitely underrated. Here our opponent is a limit break decks, which means that our MLB can apply its crit pressure similar to what our opponent did in a previous match. So here we ride the Leon because we have all the pieces that we need. We have a Blaster Dark, we have a Blaster Blade through Gancelot, as well as an MLB. The K I want to keep in my hand as a booster and as a potential unit that can attack your opponent's intercept to allow MLB to finish out the game later in the game. The Leon just doesn't have that much utility at the moment. We do hit a trigger, which means we'll hit 17 and opponent's Vanguard cannot hit. But you know, the Garuda combo does unflip the damage. So our 17k base does stop the second attack. And here, if you have seen the video, you will notice that I did not play 2 Galatins in the previous build. The reason why I did decide to play Galatin instead of EVA is because the 10k defense actually does play, you know, a decent enough role in terms of your second turn. Being the 9k base means that a lot of opponents can rush you, which is the ideal strategy against MLB at this point. You know, putting them to 3 or 4 damage and then finishing off the game when they're on the MLB turn, you know, when they lack intercepts. So the 10k base definitely does play a role in keeping you alive for longer. Calling the Blaster Dark together with the intercept and allow me to push for more damage. Opponent damages drive checks a PG, so that's definitely something to note, and we do check the MLB damage trigger, which means we do draw a card, and that is a PG. Definitely really good. So we do obviously ride the MLB here. Call it the Blaster Dark, Blaster Blade. Since we do have the PG, there's no reason to waste our last grade 2 intercept and place it on the board for the 1 intercept this turn. I am going to retire our opponent because we can set up 16k columns on both sides, and then our Vanguard will be 22k, allowing us to deal 4 damage if everything goes well. Unfortunately it doesn't. We can still do the MLB combo to 22, hitting our opponent even if they do hit the defensive trigger, playing with the PG, and then damage denying them at 3 damage. Of course, even if they do have the limit break, it will be not very useful because our front row is empty. And so the Vermilion Thunderbolt poses no harm to me, except for getting extra power, which could help go through our defenses. The Indra, again, 17k column, pretty good number, but unfortunately the Indra does not have any utility. Calling up the Indra also highlights that our opponent doesn't have, you know, any grade 2 options, and the last card is probably going to be an intercept, a perfect guard. So we do get the Gancelot. Gancelot searches for a Blaster Blade. And here we can build a 16k column. The K can come up and hit the Indra, forcing our opponent to invest more in order to even attack the intercepts. Unless our opponent doesn't have the PG. Here I hit the heal. I'd rather put it to Blaster Blade so I can potentially finish the game if our opponent doesn't have a PG and does not hit any defensives. And here I'm considering if I should give the opponent the 4th damage. The reason why I do decide to is because while my opponent can get value through Vermilion Thunderbolt, it puts my opponent at 4. Opponent doesn't have any hand, which means they don't have, you know, the likelihood of drawing into that PG is quite low, and that means that my 1 attack with the MLB can seal the game. If I do leave them at 3, it means that my rearguard column has to hit them first, and then I need a booster with the MLB to attack my opponent from 4 to 6. And that assumes my opponent doesn't get a defensive trigger. If they do, then I can't finish the game. And so definitely putting them to 4 is the wise decision. Here, the defensive doesn't really matter. I still have, you know, 4 damage to go before I die. And the Palamedes doesn't really make a difference here. You know, our opponent probably doesn't draw into a PG. And, well, if they do, then, you know, it's just another turn for me. My opponent doesn't have any crit pressure options other than hitting a crit. We hit a heal, which means our Blaster Blade can hit 21. So even if our opponent does have a PG, we can still pass, and I do win this game. So after a quite intense 4th round, we go into our 5th round against Fluors. Fluors is also, you know, one of the participants in the Vanguard Championship 2020. Very formidable opponent, very strong. Again, the Vermilion deck, devastating, hitting draw triggers here and there. This match wasn't really that impressive to see. You know, I set up my pieces, my opponent set up their pieces, and while Shadow does do better in terms of consistency and getting our pieces, Vermilion just thunderbolts everything, and then I lose the game. Since we lost the first game, the second game is all the more important. We do choose to play the Spike Brothers, since I do believe it has a better matchup against the Narukami, since the units do dodge into the deck, and I can Superior Call a lot. I do mulligan into, the grade 3 Cypherid. Personally, not Deadly Emperor, but it's better than riding a Juggernaut or a Jelly Beans, I assume. Here I'm saving my Jelly Beans again, since I already have a non-Braki grade 2 ride. I think I'm okay keeping it in my hand so I can heal, increase the probability of healing later on instead of now. Opponent does ride the SPPG. That's great because, well, while we do have the multi-attack, every less PG our opponent has means that our offense is easier. Riding Douglas, and here we do play the Devil Summoner, and unfortunately we do check the Deadly Emperor. And generally speaking, my advice would be to use the Mecha Trainer early game, especially against a Retire Clan. But here I value the aggression more importantly. Unfortunately, it doesn't pay off, but if it did, well, I'm dealing 2 damage, and our opponent, will use 1 Counterblast in order to Saishin our Mecha Trainer, assuming they don't have Garuda. And, that's not that bad, especially since we don't have a lot of pieces anyways in our hands. So Saishin does come out. I hit a defensive heal, which is great. And then here is our turn again. Here we ride the Cypherid, better than the Juggernaut or the Jelly Beans. Getting the Dudley Douglas here for defense. And this was a minor misplay. Like, if I did attack with Vanguard first, that means I can get the 5 to the Dudley Douglas, and so I will have 2 attacks rather than just none, because now opponent hits becomes 14 at minimum, and the 11k won't pass, right? So yeah, and our opponent doesn't hit defensive, so this is definitely a misplay on my end, something to reconsider when reflecting on this game. Opponent rides the Vermilion, calls the Vermilion out, calls the Dijin out, and this either signals pure aggression or lack of grade 2 options. Either one could be true, or both, because our opponent is at low damage at 2. They're not afraid of taking damage, and they would rather increase the pressure since I'm on Cypherid instead of on Deadly Emperor, and they're not afraid of my limit break since I don't have it. Here I pull up the Deadly Emperor. I call the Deadly Douglas as an intercept, call it the 7k booster so it hits 16k numbers. 10k has to hit the 10k, can't hit the Vermilion, don't hit any triggers. The 11k hits the Vanguard, and then my 60k hits the Vanguard. Yes, this does allow our opponent to Vermilion Thunderbolt, use the skill, but we still have other options in our hand, and we have to win this game. We can't stall out the game any longer. And our opponent does damage check PG, which is great. So 2 down, 2 to go. In addition, in this case, if our opponent does Vermilion Thunderbolt and he doesn't hit a trigger, and we do, then we shut down the last attack. But unfortunately, that's not the case. They do hit the heal, putting them to 3. We hit the heal, putting us to 3. So then, with the last attack, we were at 4. And our opponent's at 3. So that's still not a horrible position. We still have 1 PG to protect us with. We get the Jelly Bean. We will use the Jelly Bean. Search for the intercept. Call it out. Call out the Juggernaut. So Juggernaut acts as a soft taunt again. 11k body also lets you hit numbers, rather than sacrificing an intercept and a grade 2 right now with Braki. And then we go phase again, putting them to 5. Fortunately, our opponent did not hit any more heals, which means we might have a chance to finish the game next turn, as long as if our opponent doesn't hit any triggers and we hit 1 defensive. Opponent decides not to use the Vermilion Thunderbolts, which is a bit of a question mark, but perhaps they do believe the game will be longer. We see the 3rd PG, so at most 1 PG in our opponent's hand. And so we actually have a chance here. We have the PG, but with the PG, we hit the draw trigger.
and both of my units can hit the number to force our opponent's last PG out, and then hopefully seal the game right here. And that's it. Alright. So coming out of our last game, I will continue with Spike Brothers since it did do me well. Opponent does shift into Shadow Paladins. Honestly, I believe in theory this matchup is for Shadow Paladins because they do get the 13k base, and Spike Brothers does have difficulty getting over those numbers, those bigger numbers. So we mulligan really well. We have the Medical Manager, our ideal first ride. We have a Panther, ideal second ride, and then we have the Dudley Emperor, our ideal third ride. Yes, oh, unfortunately we do soul charge the Jelly Beans, but that's alright. The Shadow Paladin does have some crit pressure opportunities, but generally speaking not as much as other, consistent crit, extra crit units like Perfect Riser or MLB. Opponent hits the heal, which is great, which means one less heal to worry about later on. And the main does proc, discarding Blaster Dart to draw 2. Opponent building those 18k columns, which means that even if I do hit a trigger, and my opponent doesn't, they will pass. And it doesn't really matter here, opponent does hit a draw and we don't. 2 brackets into damage zone, very unfortunate since they are an important piece in the deck. We do draw into a Juggernaut, which does something similar. The Panther ideal ride. Searching for the PG because our opponent does have that crit pressure on turn 3. Putting the Jelly Beans back because we are at a damage disadvantage, which means our heal will proc. Considering calling out and building that 16k column. Will I do it though? Nope, I will not. I will keep it in my pocket. That's largely because we do want to keep the Reckless Express safe. It is one of the few multi-attack options I do have. And we do hit the heal. Opponent hits the draw, and that's fine. Healing that 1 damage is much more significant than hitting that draw trigger. Opponent does get the PBD. Calling out the full bow here, building a 10k column, which means they can hit the rearguard and the Vanguard at this point. Calling out the Curse Lancer. So pulling the domain back could also signify, not having a lot of intercept options, and that definitely could come into play later on. But never mind that. For now, our opponent puts a really strong pressure onto me. But fortunately, I do hit a heal, which does help alleviate the pressure. Riding the Dudley Emperor, calling the the 7k Devil Summoner. Unfortunately, not getting a unit again. Not a big fan of me, I suppose. 7k hits, the Juggernaut with the soft taunt hits, and then the Dudley Emperor attacks, hoping to bring the game back even 2-2. So opponent hits a PG, so that's great. Opponent rides the PBO, and this is when the game gets challenging because I don't have any boosters necessarily. If I call out the Reckless Express, it's just going to get retired by PBO, and time is ticking for me to finish out the game. Opponent does call out the PBD, which either means they're willing to be more aggressive or they don't have any intercept options. And we've seen that they kept in the main, which could signify that straight up they don't have a lot of grade 2 options in play. But they do put us to 4, hoping to make the game fast. And this is the most important part of the game that I completely misplayed. I called out the Juggernaut maximum and I'm like, wait, why? And because of that awkward positioning with the Juggernaut maximum, not setting up an extra intercept instead, I lose the game.
And we're back to Entropy. Welcome back. I hope you're not too tired. I hope you enjoyed the videos. 5 rounds of best of 3s, upwards of 15 games is really exhausting, especially if it's in one sitting. So I hope you took a break when watching this video. This last fight was actually the fight for top 4, and I lost. So that means I still had round 6 to play to fight for 3rd place. Unfortunately, I lost that game and I lost the footage, so I couldn't really show you the fight. Was it really entertaining? Yeah, it was really entertaining. The opponent played a really interesting build of Spike Brothers, something that I would have definitely wanted to show you, but it's gone. Anyways, so I did get 4th place. Hooray, self-hype. and that meant I won 5 packs. 5 packs is actually pretty good. 4 hours of gameplay for 5 packs is pretty good. So I'm pretty content with that. And most importantly, top 8 qualifies for the qualifying tournament tomorrow morning, which means I did actually get an invite to it. I will be playing that tournament, and I hope you all wish me the best of luck. Hope you really enjoyed this video. If you did, click the subscribe button down below, so either here or here. And yeah, see you all next time. Bye.